Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you another Goosebumps talk type of video. This subject is a bit harder to talk about than some others because there's so many differing opinions on this specific topic that I think some people might get upset with what I'm about to say. First and foremost, be full warned, I'm not coming after anybody. I'm just speaking from my honest perspective and opinions about this whole thing. And the topic is going to be around the reasons why there hasn't been an Anthology Goosebumps TV show revival. And look, so many people have looked at this new show from 2023 and said they should have just done an anthology, right? That's implying that they kept the same producers and all that. And that's a whole different rabbit hole that I don't want to get into in this video. But that is the baseline of what I'm discussing here because so many people seem to think that an anthology would work today. And I think a Goosebumps anthology logistically could work. And I think a lot of the arguments I have seen from people, I'm not trying to call anyone out, are kind of out of line and also overreaching for why a Goosebumps anthology show couldn't work. And I'll just name a few. There's theories out there about why Disney Plus or Sony didn't want to make a Goosebumps anthology show. Some of it stems from the Just Beyond anthology show that was, put out in the infancy of the Disney Plus streaming app. Got no promotion, pretty much had no advertising to it, and it flopped hard to the point where Disney Plus pulled it off. And some people have used that as, a metric saying that, hey, if Just Beyond fails, Goosebumps is going to fail. Well, let's be honest. Goosebumps is a way bigger IP, way more brand recognition than Just Beyond ever had, if I'm being honest. And I'm just going to call it like I see it. I think that's very overreaching to assume that. Some other things people have brought up is that the success of Stranger Things and the success of shows like the Are You Afraid of the Dark revival have kind of steered away the kids' horror genre from anthology further because those formats work. Well, let me be honest. We don't know, I think, at this point, if Are You Afraid of the Dark is getting a season 4, but I think it's implied. Stranger Things is going into its final season. There's only so much story it can tell. There's limitations with that, right? So, is this the right move? Well, I kind of think of this like the whole movie strategy they had with the first film. Obviously, they were trying to replicate Jumanji. And we see how the first movie was a success because they did the Jumanji format, except with Goosebumps. People seemed to like it, which is fine. Second movie, people didn't like it. Things ran its course. The movie stopped. People might have been upset that there was no more movies. But now we have a show, and people are upset again because the show's not like the movies or the books, and it keeps getting further and further away from the source material. And it all comes back to this, right? I think anthology is pretty successful. Two examples I want to share currently are the Creepshow show and Are You Afraid of the Dark, what they're doing. Creepshow is an adult anthology series. It's gone into season 4. It just wrapped up with its airing. I think it dropped all the episodes on Shudder. As of now, there's no word on a season 5, but it's heavily implied. There's a comic series going on. There's still a lot of Creepshow merch. There's some new toys being planned for the near future. Creepshow is a successful anthology franchise on the television medium. And for Are You Afraid of the Dark, the pretty much Goosebumps' biggest competitor, they recently came out with a book line, graphic novels, you name it. They came out with a podcast. And instead of just having stuff like this, where we get this, overarching story with teenagers, doing whatever, episodic, long-form storytelling, we have new mediums to get stories. And I'll pull up this Witch's Wings graphic novel here. You have 3 anthological stories in this. The podcast dropped podcast exclusive stories. There's a book line, like I said. I mean, there's so much content. Are You Afraid of the Dark's outproducing Goosebumps' content, at least right now in the books. Because the books, like, the House of Shivers series, the final book of Slappy World, right? These are still anthology style stories going on in the books, right? The show, the movies, all of that, they're not what the books are. So where am I going with this, right? I think part of the problem is that, even before we had confirmation about this new show, people's expectations for an anthology reboot was insane, right? Is there going to be a reboot of the old show? Are they going to adapt stories they already made? Whatever the case may be. Some people were for not adapting episodes already made. Some people were for absolutely doing old episodes again. And look, there's no right or wrong answer, but I will say this. What's the incentive? What's the incentive of them reviving the old show? Better yet than just rebooting the old show and just doing the similar stories that creators have already kind of put their stamp on, right? And this comes into the controversial territory of altering the source material. The glorification, I think nostalgia plays a part in this for a lot of folks. The glorification of the 90s show is also kind of stretched in the fandom. And I'll hold this episode up. On him as 2. If you're a book fan and an old TV show fan, you would know that the book and the episode are basically two totally different stories. Yet people like both of them, right? People are open to creative differences, especially when the creators understand the source material. Dan Angel and Billy Brown, Neil Shusterman, Charles Laser, Ron Oliver, all of these writers, try to insert some creativity where they could, even though there was a lot of limitations with the old show, and I'll get into that in just a minute. Yet they were still able to, put fresh twists on some stories that Stein made. Some of them have arguably stuck more so than the book counterparts. And people want to say that, in this new anthology, they're supposed to be more book accurate and book faithful. Because we had the episodes that did stuff different. Now we want more so the same stuff. Well, here's the thing about that. I've kind of come to this conclusion about this. You can agree to disagree. If you don't, that's fine. What I think is the real problem with the old show, and I think what the problem would be with a new show, maybe not to the same effect, because if I'm being honest, these books were being released in their prime when that old show was going on. So the old show had the problem of kind of being a competitor with itself, right? You look at season 2 episodes, Attack the Jack-o'-lanterns, Calling All Creeps. Those stories were given in like draft form in advance to the show before the books ever released. And they try to coincide the episode release to be with the books. The problem with that is you have mildly different takes on the stories. And what happens is people assume that the book is going to be like the episode. And like I said, nostalgia plays a big part in this, or I guess being young and kind of indifferent, or maybe just overgeneralizing things. There are differences in the product, right? And that kind of, made it to where you can just watch the episode for free, take that version, or you can ask your parents to go buy you a book, or you can, work, make your own money to get your own book, get the TV book, read that. There's so many different versions of the story out there at the same time being marketed that I feel like you're kind of getting in the way of your own self. That was the problem with the old show, I think, in the long run, right? Not really being able to kind of see that issue, I do think that was a heavy issue in the whole thing. These days, when, a lot of these classic books have been out for 26 years, fans have, spent decades falling in love with these stories. There's that expectation that they want to see that book on screen verbatim like it was on page. There's no creative leeway for producers. There's no creative liberty like a normal anthology show would. And when I pulled for an example for a normal anthology show that ran 90 episodes that were super successful, was Tales from the Dark Side. Now here's the thing. Tales from the Dark Side operates pretty much like how most anthology shows typically operate. You're not having creators, writers, producers pulling source material from one author, right? From one series. All these stories are either being treated into the show by original concepts written to script or adapted from short stories that producers had found or maybe recruited for. And they all synergistically work together to create an anthology format with different styles of storytelling, different monsters, different concepts that, other authors bring to the table that one author just can't. It's not held back by that. Every single anthology show in history follows this almost. Even Creepshow today follows that. There's adaptations and original content. Are You Afraid of the Dark? I think was all original content, so they never really had that issue. Maybe some adaptations with some way older stories that were public domain or something. But Haunting Hour, famous show that came out, 13, 14 years ago. That show had some adaptations in there, but it was mostly new content being written for the show. Which leads us to Goosebumps. Goosebumps has how many books, how many stories out there? Fans seem to think, why make new content when there's so much that you can adapt, right? They're kind of nose blind to the anthology show formula, in my opinion. I think a lot of people are kind of disconnected from that. Goosebumps is definitely the outlier in the anthology show idea, because there's the expectation that every single episode has to be pulled from a Goosebumps book or Goosebumps anthology book collection like Tales to Give You Goosebumps. If it's not in those, fans are unresponsive. Look, Trilogy. Trilogy had a negative reaction back in the day. It has for over the years. There are a lot of dedicated fans to this. There is a massive cult following. There's tons of fans that come after these episodes, thinking that they got in the way of getting books adapted. I've heard the same argument about more Monster Blood. People are like, they should have made Monster Blood too. They didn't want to see more Monster Blood. Fans, if they're that ugly over pretty much 2 episodes that were created from scratch, out of the how many episodes from the original show, imagine how that feels for producers going into a new anthology show. Imagine being told that you can't create your own stories. You can't do this, can't do that. But what you can do is faithfully adapt these books. What's the upside to that? Well, what they can do is take liberties with music, aesthetic. They can take maybe liberties with who they cast. But I still feel like that's not going to please everyone. You know what I mean? So some people might be like, well, completionists. You can just say, hey, look, we give you creative freedom just like the old show had. You can put your own spin and twist on it. But it rises the point again. How long is that going to, run its course for? Are fans going to be happy that if they take Night of the Living Dummy and just take the names of Lindy and Chris and Mr. Wood and completely scrap the story and make something completely new? How many people would like that these days? I don't think it would be the same as when this show was coming out with the books, because there was some sort of excuse back then because all the books were new, and the show was kind of like a gateway for them to get access to the stories in hopes that they would go buy the books. We saw that in the long term did not really work out, but that was kind of the cop-out. You don't have the cop-out here, right? So why change the source material now? Which leads me to this point. The real reason why an anthology, revival of Goosebumps has yet to happen is because of the creative freedom. The ability to allow creators to contribute new content, new stories, right? That's the biggest hurdle. It also translates to the books. Look, I've said it on the podcast when in episode 2 on Goose Junkies. I'll say it again. R.L. Stine's up there in age. He's 80 years old. He has other projects he works on. He's a busy man. He only makes like 2 to 3 Goosebumps books a year these days. And I truly feel, and this is coming from a place of, love and admiration for this franchise, Goosebumps has kind of become a mecca of kids' horror. It's the most recognizable IP next to Are You Afraid of the Dark? And countless of knockoffs have fallen by the wayside, have fallen victim to the 4-book curse, especially in modern times, trying to come out and replicate the success. Knockoffs don't nearly last as long as they used to back in the 90s. And that's mostly because they, for the most part, stuck to the books and did not try to branch out into TV shows. Some did. Some might have had some mild success. Some definitely didn't. But, you don't see Goosebumps knockoffs these days. The books are pretty much where you're getting your kids' horror anthology fix, for the most part. Fans that are fans of the books are anthology fans at heart. They want to see an anthology show, but it's just the reason why it hasn't been made is because producers have taken to the safe route, not only with Stranger Things and all that, but they're not doing that because it's successful. They're doing it because there's not enough in it for them to want to do anthology, right? And the confidence there, I will say this. I think a Goosebumps anthology show, regardless of what I'm saying, what I just said, if we had an anthology show in the place of this 2023 show from the get-go, I still think people would have been massively in support of it. I still think a lot of people still would have tuned into it. I don't think it matters. As long as it has the Goosebumps name, fans are going to go check it out. That's a fair assumption. But for me, the observation I've come to is that there has to be a mixture of adaptations and new stories in the TV show to make it worthwhile, especially with an IP that has way less new content coming out these days as it did 25 years ago, where there was a book a month. You're only getting 2 to 3 books a year. So that thirst for new content is there from fans. The TV show would be the best place for that. But the problem is the fan base seems to be totally against having the TV show make new stories. They want just book adaptations. And I feel like until fans can kind of accept that for Goosebumps to work as an anthology, I think, and be healthy long term, to run 72, 90 episodes, you need that mixture of brand new content exclusive to the show and adaptations from fan favorite books. I think that's the best approach. Without that, I just don't see this hypothetical anthology revival ever happening. Maybe there's some production companies out there willing to do it because they want the money and because they're passionate about Goosebumps. I don't think that would ever be an issue if they really wanted to go out and seek that. But all I'm saying is, to kind of wrap up this discussion, the reason why these production companies haven't come forward is simply for the fact that, imagine if you're a writer and you're told that you can work on a show, but you have to work on somebody else's source material exclusively. You're never allowed to contribute your own, or hardly ever, and if you look at the old show, Dan Angel and Billy Brown got Trilogy made because they pushed hard for it. It just wasn't handed to them. They had to do it. The only reason why more Monster Blood got made was because of financial issues with making Monster Blood 2, so they worked with what they had and they made something new. The budget wasn't there. I totally get the sentiment. People want a bigger budget show with modern technology adapting their favorite books. But then again, we kind of rise to the issue: would a show these days be counterproductive? Would a faithful adaptation to the T of Haunted Mass 2, right? If you made however long episode of Haunted Mass 2 and it's pretty much faithful to the book, is that going to be worthwhile for a kid to watch the episode and then go read the book with the same exact story? I mean, I'm just saying, like, would you rather sit through a 30, 40-minute episode or spend 90 minutes reading? I mean, I guess it's all on your preference, but I think majority of kids, especially these days, would pick the episode. So, what, there's just so much to think about in that. But yeah, I feel like, my contribution to the discussion is that people should be more open to the idea that if we really want an anthology show in Goosebumps, we have to kind of embrace people outside of R.L. Stine making stories and content for this hypothetical show. And I think that would definitely itch a lot of scratches we have for new content, because Stine's only one person. He has so many other projects going on. You can obviously tell his main focus is not Goosebumps. He does still make books for the fans, but even then, I think at some point, fans are going to have to kind of warm up to the idea, if Goosebumps is going to be the mecca of kids' horror and is going to carry the torch for kids' horror, that at some point, some other writers are going to have to take over for R.L. Stine to keep the books alive, just so kids' horror can stay alive. You know what I mean? And that day might come sooner than later. But yeah, it goes both ways, and that's pretty much all I have to say on this topic. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the reasons why an anthology Goosebumps show revival hasn't happened. Let me know down in the comment section, do you agree, do you disagree with what I said? And what are your thoughts on the topic? I'm dying to know. I'll see you next time.